The morning air in New Orleans still carried the heavy scent of salt and sewage. Olivia Hart stood frozen on the patch of ground where Sweet Magnolia had once stood, her food truck, her dream. Now it was nothing more than scorched steel framing, a caved-in axle, and shards of glass catching the sunlight like cruel reminders of what had been. 3 days earlier, Hurricane Delilah had torn through the city, sweeping away everything in its path. 6 months of savings, 2 years of planning, and just 8 weeks of operation, all gone in a single night. Olivia bent down and picked up a smeared piece of menu, the faded outline of her mother's lemon butter cookie recipe still visible like a ghost of hope and love. She could hear chainsaws and emergency crews working in the distance. The city was cleaning up, trying to move on. But Olivia stood still, rooted in place. It wasn't just her business she'd lost. It was part of her soul. The food truck was a legacy built from memories with her mother, from a tiny kitchen where she'd been taught that sugar and butter can heal almost anything. Her phone buzzed for the 3rd time, her insurance company again. She didn't answer. She already knew the words they'd use: natural disaster, not covered, deductible too high. Translation, you're on your own. Then came the voice she hadn't realized she was waiting to hear. Olivia? Camille stood behind her, still in blood-smeared scrubs, eyes rimmed with exhaustion but filled with concern. Her best friend had come straight from a night shift at the hospital. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Camille said softly. Olivia swallowed hard, eyes locked on the wreckage. "This was everything I had." Camille wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders. "And then we'll figure out how to help you start again." Morning light streamed through the tattered curtains. Olivia sat curled in a brown armchair, knees drawn to her chest, holding a mug of cold coffee. Camille's apartment was always neat and orderly, but today it felt strangely cold. Maybe because everything inside Olivia felt cracked and hollow. Camille walked out of the bedroom in wrinkled scrubs, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She dropped a paper bag on the table. "Breakfast sandwich from the hospital cafeteria. I know it's not great, but at least it's warm." Olivia gave a faint, almost invisible smile. "Thanks." They sat in silence, the hum of the AC filling the space. Camille glanced at Olivia, then away, biting her lip. She was clearly holding something back. "What is it?" Olivia asked, her voice hoarse. Camille hesitated, then rushed her words like she was afraid she'd change her mind. "There's this guy. At the hospital. His name is Adrian Cole. He's not a patient. He's a major donor, very private." Olivia nodded slightly. The name rang a bell. Somewhere in a tech magazine. A reclusive genius. Had vanished from the media for 3 years. They called him the ghost of Silicon Valley. "He's looking for a woman to carry his child," Camille continued, "but not through a clinic. Naturally, just once." The air in the room shifted. Olivia placed her mug down, harder than she meant to. "Excuse me?" Camille held up her hands. "Wait, just listen. This isn't a joke. He has lawyers, contracts, everything is legal. Clean." "You're telling me there's a man who wants to pay to sleep with me and get me pregnant?" Olivia laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was cracked, bitter. "Isn't that just prostitution?" No, it's not." Camille leaned in, voice low. "You don't see how desperate you've become. You've lost everything, Liv, and I can't watch you fall apart." "Though your solution is to sell my body?" Olivia stood, eyes shimmering but dry. "You think I've fallen that far?" "It's not falling, it's choosing. And it might be the one choice that gives you a second chance." Camille stood too, eyes steady. "You're good. You made something beautiful from a tiny kitchen and your mom's old recipes. But being good doesn't pay rent. It doesn't rebuild Sweet Magnolia." Olivia turned away. A war was waging inside her. Pride, morality, principle, all pulled taut. She wasn't someone who gave up. But the truth was, she had no options left. Camille sighed and gently placed a business card on the table. "Valeria Cruz, Adrian Cole's assistant. If you call, they'll arrange a meeting. No pressure, no obligation, just to hear him out. Olivia looked at the card, white and glossy, silver lettering shimmering in the light. Her chest tightened. For a long while, she sat frozen, replaying the words in her mind. No pressure, just hear him out. But even that sounded like a bargain with her own pride. Silence stretched, then she whispered like a confession. I never imagined my life would come to this. Camille gently touched her shoulder. None of us do, but sometimes saving yourself means crossing lines you swore you never would. Olivia didn't reply, but she picked up the card and slipped it into her coat pocket. And in her mind, one question echoed again and again. What's the real cost of a new beginning? The building stood at the far end of the garden district, quiet, dignified, and strangely intimidating. Its glass walls caught the amber morning light, and inside was a space so pristine, so still, Olivia felt like she had stepped into a different world. Sterile, silent, and unnervingly perfect. She tightened her grip on her purse as she approached the front desk, where a dark-haired woman with immaculate makeup and an unreadable expression was waiting. Olivia Hart? The woman asked softly. Yes. Follow me, please. They walked down a long hallway so quiet that Olivia's footsteps echoed. Every door they passed was closed, and not a sound came from behind them. Valeria Cruz, she assumed that was her name, led Olivia into a large conference room, all glass and metal. Standing by the far window was Adrian Cole, his back turned, looking out over the garden below. He turned when they entered. He didn't look anything like she'd imagined, not some eccentric old man or a smug power broker. He wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, and his pale gray eyes watched her with quiet calculation, as if he were decoding her in real time. Thank you for coming, he said, voice low and steady. Olivia nodded and sat across from him. Her palms were already damp. Maybe I should just ask the obvious, she said. Why me? Adrian sat, placing a tablet on the table between them. You have an excellent health record, no genetic disorders. You're independent, emotionally unattached, and according to my assistant, responsible. And apparently desperate enough. No, Adrian shook his head. I don't prey on desperation. I offer a contract, clear and rational. The choice is entirely yours. Olivia studied him. There was something cold, not cruel, but temperatureless, as if he operated from a logic untouched by emotion. I don't understand why you want to do this way, she whispered. He looked at her for a moment, then answered plainly, because I don't believe in randomness. I don't want a clinic choosing for me. I want to know the woman carrying my child. I want to understand the origin. What about love? Not everyone needs love to build a family, Adrian replied without blinking. Olivia swallowed. Valeria stepped forward, placing a folder in front of her. A sample contract, she said. You may take it home. It outlines medical, legal, financial terms, and privacy clauses. Olivia glanced at the pages. The payment. $2 million upon delivery. All medical expenses covered. Housing, insurance, full parental rights to Adrian. And the baby? Can I see them again? If you wish, we can include limited visitation clauses that do not affect custodial rights. Valeria replied. Silence settled. Olivia clenched her hands. In her mind, she heard her mother's voice. You don't need much in life, just your character. But character doesn't pay rent. She stood, voice steady but thin. I'll review it, but my lawyer will read every line. Adrian nodded. I would expect nothing less, and I will never pressure you, but if you agree, everything will move swiftly. Olivia turned away, her thoughts swirling. She couldn't believe she was seriously considering carrying a stranger's child. But the scariest part was, she didn't feel as disgusted as she thought she would. And just a week later, Olivia returned to that building, this time not to ask why, but to follow through with what she had agreed to do. The apartment sat on the top floor of a quiet boutique hotel, rented by Adrian for the evening. Olivia arrived 10 minutes early. She didn't know why, maybe to feel in control, or maybe to avoid the chance of changing her mind. She wore a simple ivory dress, no makeup, her hair tied low. Everything about her was quiet, from her footsteps to her breathing. Outside, it was raining softly, the first rain since the hurricane. Adrian opened the door. He too was dressed simply, a thin gray sweater, dark trousers. There was nothing transactional about him. No wine, no candles, no awkward gestures. And somehow, that made it feel even more unsettling. She stepped in and set her purse down on a chair. "How do we start?" she asked, her voice dry. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He studied her for a moment, then motioned gently toward the sofa near the window. "There's no rush," he said. "If you want to change your mind, you still can." Olivia sat down, her fingers twisted together until her knuckles turned white. "No," I agreed. "I'm not backing out, I don't know if this is supposed to feel normal." Adrian nodded slightly. "I'm not sure either. This is my first time doing anything like this." A brief, faint smile appeared on her lips. The room settled into silence for a few minutes, broken only by the soft tap of rain outside. Then Adrian walked over and sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "No need to act like in the movies," he said quietly. "We just have to be honest." Honest. The word echoed, like a comfort. Olivia turned to face him. Adrian's eyes didn't look away. They stayed on hers, steady, listening. It wasn't the gaze of someone who wanted to buy something. It was the gaze of a man cautiously opening a door he wasn't sure he knew how to walk through. And then they touched. Slowly. No rush, not like in the contract they had signed, but as if both unintentionally were offering something they hadn't meant to give. By the time the night faded, Olivia lay still beneath the muted city light. Adrian had fallen asleep, his back turned toward her. She watched him for a long time, unsure if it was out of curiosity or because something inside her had just shifted. There were moments Olivia thought she'd prepared herself for, but nothing in the logic, the contract, or Adrian's initial coldness could have prepared her for this. For the way he touched her. Not hurriedly, but gently, as if she were the first person he'd ever been allowed to reach without fear of being hurt. For the way he paused halfway, looked into her eyes, and asked in a quiet whisper, "Are you okay?" Just two simple words. But in his gaze, Olivia saw something not written in any contract. It was hesitation. A fear of rejection he masked expertly, a small fracture in the flawless exterior of a man who seemed to have no weaknesses. And in that moment, Olivia understood. Adrian wasn't cold because he was cruel. He was cold because he was afraid. He controlled because he had once lost. He planned because he no longer believed in life's randomness. In that room, with no promises, no love, no obligations, there existed something more honest than anything she had felt in years. When Adrian gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, Olivia closed her eyes. Not out of shame, but because in that fleeting moment, she felt safe. Strange, wasn't it? When she had expected to feel empty, broken, maybe even disgusted, but instead, she felt still. As if everything before, the storm, the burnt-out truck, the loss, had been laid down, even if just for a night. And what startled her most was when she placed her hand on his chest, where his heart beat loud and honest. She no longer felt like this was a transaction. Something had shifted. From that moment on, everything began to change. She didn't know what had changed that night, in Adrian, in herself, or in what they used to call a contract. But just a few weeks later, when two red lines appeared clearly on the pregnancy test, Olivia understood something real had begun. Olivia stared at the pregnancy test in her hand, her heartbeat pounding so hard she could hear it echoing in her chest. Two red lines. Clear. Undeniable. She was pregnant. All the emotions hit at once: shock, trembling, confusion, and something strange, not fear, not joy, more like standing at a crossroads, with every path covered in fog. That night, she texted Valeria. Less than 2 hours later, Adrian called. No assistant, no message. Just him. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "Absolutely," Olivia said. "I took 2 tests and had it confirmed." A beat of silence. Then Adrian said, "I'll send the best OBGYN to you. You don't need to go to a public clinic." From that point on, everything began to shift. Quietly, gradually. Adrian arranged a new apartment for her, spacious, sunlit, beautifully furnished. Each week, she received boxes of organic food, prenatal vitamins, and thank you notes written in Adrian's own hand. He never intruded, never showed up unannounced, but he was present for all the important milestones. The first ultrasound, when the doctor let her hear the baby's heartbeat, the time she had severe morning sickness and he had someone deliver exactly the congee she liked. Olivia began to feel the boundaries blur. This was no longer a role she was playing. Adrian wasn't just fulfilling a duty. He listened. He remembered the details. He knew she liked to read at night, hated feather pillows, and didn't drink tea after 6 p.m. And then, one evening, when she walked into the clinic, Adrian was already there, seated with a book cradled in both hands. A worn-out yellow parenting guide. "You're reading that?" she asked, surprised. Adrian shrugged, eyes dropping to the book. "First-time father. I don't want to screw it up." Olivia looked at him. A part of her softened, but another part pulled back. Cautious, because the more he stepped into her world, the more she feared. What would happen when the contract ended? Were these gestures real, or just the careful planning of a man making sure his investment was done right? At first, the morning and evening calls made Olivia feel cared for. Adrian asked about her sleep, meals, nausea, or fatigue. He never asked pointless questions, never made small talk, but he always remembered what week of the pregnancy it was, what nutrients she needed, even that the bathwater shouldn't exceed a certain temperature. Once, she casually mentioned she'd been craving sour food. The next day, a large box of artisanal pickles, mango slices in brine, and fresh lemonade appeared at her doorstep. She smiled, but something shifted. Every time Adrian asked, "What did you eat today?" the question began to feel less warm and more like a daily report. Her favorite foods arrived, but she didn't choose them. Books on child rearing appeared in her bedroom. Her pillows were replaced with pregnancy-safe ones, without anyone asking. She knew he meant well, but his kindness started to feel like a blueprint in which she was just a silent participant. The tipping point came when she received an email from a prenatal course she'd never signed up for. The message read, "Payment completed by Mr. Adrian Cole." Olivia froze. She called him immediately. "You signed me up for a class without asking." Her voice was sharp. "Thought it was necessary. They're reputable. You'll need the knowledge." "I also need the right to choose," she said slowly. "I'm not your employee. This is my body, my life." There was silence on the other end. "You're right," Adrian said at last. "I apologize." She ended the call. But the confusion inside her didn't end with it. She couldn't tell anymore if she was being cherished or being controlled with a tenderness that felt too precisely calculated. Olivia wasn't someone who jumped to suspicion, but the clues started stacking up. The new building security guard greeted her like an old friend, though she'd never met him. The food delivery guy asked, "Did you sleep well last night?" in a tone far too familiar with her insomnia. She began testing it, changed her walking route, wore sunglasses and a cap, wandered into a small bookshop in a neighborhood she'd never visited. 3 days later, a package arrived, a book she had flipped through for less than a minute, hadn't spoken about, hadn't purchased. Her blood ran cold. She texted Valeria, "We need to talk in person." The meeting was held in Adrian's office. He looked calm as always, but this time, Olivia didn't sit. She stood, clutching a thick folder, printed security footage, logs of her locations, notes of her daily activities, minute by minute. "You had me followed?" she asked, her voice raw. Adrian didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised. "I wanted to ensure your safety." "Safety?" Olivia let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You know where I go, who I see, what I eat. You even know how long I sit in the park. That's not protection, that's control. You're carrying my child," Adrian said, his voice steady. "I have a right." "No, you don't," she cut in. "You have the rights written in the contract, and nowhere in it does it say you can invade my private life." Silence stretched between them, no warmth, no reasoning, just a cold, unbridgeable distance. "You think I'm an incubator? A vessel?" Olivia's voice cracked. "I'm a person, Adrian. I have feelings, boundaries. I deserve to breathe without being watched." Adrian didn't respond. His eyes tightened, but he didn't look away. He seemed on the verge of saying something, but stopped himself. Olivia took a deep breath. "I will continue the pregnancy. I'll keep my word. But from this moment on, no more contact, no more gifts, no more surveillance, no more Adrian Cole." She turned, hands trembling but steps firm. The door shut behind her with a sound heavier than goodbye. Olivia thought she had been firm, that after everything, as long as she kept her distance, things would return to their original order. But life, as always, had its own way of pushing people to the edge. And that edge came on an afternoon that seemed ordinary, right in the middle of the familiar kitchen. The pain struck without warning, sharp, slicing through her abdomen. Olivia collapsed to the kitchen floor, clutching her belly as cold sweat soaked her shirt, as if she could physically hold on to the life inside her. She was only 7 months pregnant. She knew something wasn't right. Her phone trembled in her hand, dozens of names in her contact list, but somehow, without thinking, she tapped his. "Adrian." No message, no hesitation. She called. "Olivia," his voice on the other end. "Shaken?" "Please," she gasped. "St. Clair Hospital." "Oh." Less than 20 minutes later, Adrian arrived. No traffic, no confusion. He found her immediately. As the nurses wheeled her into the emergency room, he grabbed her hand and never let go. "I'm here. You're going to be okay," he whispered, close to her ear. For the next 3 days, Adrian didn't leave the hospital. He slept on a plastic chair beside her bed, bringing congee, warm towels, and water in careful intervals. He stayed quiet when she was tired, read softly when she couldn't sleep, and never missed a single doctor's update. Olivia lay there, among machines and wires, breathing antiseptic air. But for the first time, she didn't feel afraid, because he was there. Not Adrian Cole, the calculating businessman behind clauses and signatures, but a man whose hands trembled when she cried out in pain, whose silence now felt like presence, not detachment, whose every gesture said, "I choose to stay." Olivia couldn't sleep that first night in the hospital. The pain had eased with medication, but her mind wouldn't settle. The dim light from the hallway bled into the room, and the steady beeping of the heart monitor seemed to echo each hollow beat inside her. Adrian sat in the corner, on a hard plastic chair. The amber glow of the bedside lamp softened his features, making him look far from the cold, calculating businessman she once believed him to be. He held a book in his hand, but Olivia could tell he hadn't read a single page. His eyes lifted now and then to check on her, not saying anything, just watching, just making sure. When she shifted slightly, he stood up instantly. "Are you in pain?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. She shook her head. "Just a little numbness in my hand." Without another word, Adrian stepped over, gently adjusted her pillow, pulled the blanket higher, then took a warm towel and dabbed her forehead like he'd done it 100 times before. She stared at him, stunned. "You don't have to do all of this," she whispered. "I know," he said, his voice quiet. "But I want to." There was no coldness in his eyes, no strategy, just presence, steady, wordless, and real. Later, he sat beside her bed, leaning back slightly, eyes half closed with exhaustion. But the moment she moved, his eyes flicked open, alert, concerned, gentle. She had never seen anyone like that. Not because he was perfect, but because in his silence, Olivia saw something she had refused to believe for so long. He cared, deeply, and in that quiet night between IV lines and disinfectant air and the fragile rhythm of unborn life, Olivia finally saw him, not the man in the contract, not the name on the paper, but the man who stayed when he could have walked away. One light, rainy afternoon, Olivia sat next to Adrian on a hospital bench, a blanket wrapped around her belly, hands warming a cup of ginger tea. They didn't speak for almost 10 minutes, and then Adrian spoke, his voice lower than usual. "I hate hospitals," he said. "When I was a kid, my mother made me go to therapy every week, starting when I was 4. Olivia turned her head to look at him. "Every time I cried, she said I was weak. Every time I got angry, she called it losing control. I grew up with a behavior chart in the house, like a classroom. Every day, she graded my emotions like a teacher." He gave a dry laugh, but his eyes weren't smiling. "By the time I was 15, I didn't cry anymore, didn't get angry. I learned to shut it all off. And everyone praised me for being mature." Olivia clenched her hands gently. "I don't think that's what maturity means," she said softly. "I don't think so either." After the hospital scare, Adrian had started therapy again, not because anyone made him, but because he wanted to understand himself. He told Olivia this one morning while bringing her kanji, "I don't want our child to grow up with a father who doesn't understand his own feelings." Since then, he had changed. No more trying to control everything. He asked Olivia before making any decision, from doctors to crib styles. He listened, without interrupting, without invalidating her. And most importantly, he stopped trying to fix her. One morning, Adrian took Olivia to a prenatal class. No driver, no assistant. Just the two of them. He sat beside her, scribbling careful notes. Week 34. Baby kicks more when she sleeps. And left side sleeping helps circulation. Olivia looked at him, not with wariness, but with quiet gratitude. They didn't call each other lovers. There were no official labels, but in every glance, every soft shoulder brush, there was a silent agreement. They were learning how to become a family. The delivery came 2 weeks early. Olivia was rushed into the hospital at 2 a.m. under heavy rain. Her water broke while she was reading, and she barely managed to call Adrian before the pain took over. He arrived in less than 20 minutes, soaked, shirt wrinkled, no tie, but his eyes were sharper than ever. "I'm here," he said, gripping her hand, trembling but firm. "I'm not going anywhere." The labor lasted over 3 hours. When the first cry rang out, the doctor looked up with a surprised smile. A healthy baby boy? And a second cry followed shortly after. A baby girl, twins. Olivia burst into tears. Not from pain, but from something sacred she couldn't name. Before she could process it all, Adrian's grip on her hand tightened, and for the first time, she saw him cry. His tears fell silently as he held the tiny newborn in his arms. "We have 2 children," he whispered. "They're really ours." Later, when Olivia was moved to recovery, Adrian walked in, his hair still messy, hands still shaking, holding a small velvet box. He knelt beside her bed. "Olivia Hart," he began, voice hoarse. "When I first met you, I only wanted a child, but you gave me so much more. You gave me a family, a real life." He opened the box, a simple ring, no diamonds, just truth. "I want to marry you, not out of duty, not because of a contract, but because I love you, truly." Olivia looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, slowly but certainly. "About," she said softly. "We start fresh. We tear up the old contract. No conditions, no obligations. Just 2 people choosing each other." Adrian smiled, nodded, and said nothing more. He pulled from his pocket the folded contract, the one that had started it all, and, without a word, tore it slowly. Each rip echoed louder than vows. He placed the pieces into her hand, not as proof of ending, but as a promise of beginning. For the first time, everything began not from an arrangement, but from love. A year after the twins were born, Sweet Magnolia, the small bakery that once stood on the corner of the market street, was back. No more rusty roofing or old ovens, glass windows, a fresh sign that kept the original name. The scent of cinnamon and warm butter still drifted down the sidewalk, familiar, like it had never left. Behind the counter stood Olivia, holding her baby girl in one arm while showing a new staff member how to fold dough. She wore her usual soft blouse and linen apron, her hair tied in a neat bun. But her eyes no longer carried the weight of someone who had lost everything. They carried the light of someone who had walked through fire and stayed. Sweet Magnolia wasn't just reopened. It had grown into a bakery chain across 3 neighboring states. Each store held a story of a woman who had fallen and found her way back up. Adrian was the force behind its expansion, but instead of running the business, he focused his energy on a new foundation, the Magnolia Fund, supporting single mothers and newborns affected by natural disasters. "We can't stop the storms," he once said, "but we can help people find shelter." And then in that very first bakery where Olivia had once sold bread to survive, they held a wedding. Small, warm, just family, a few friends, and 2 babies gurgling in their bassinets. No extravagant gown, no orchestra, just a 2-tiered cake made by Olivia herself, with a simple buttercream message. No more contracts, just us. Adrian took her hand under the soft golden glow of sunset and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me what real love is." Olivia smiled. Every pain, every storm had only prepared them for this. From this they rebuilt a life. From a contract they found love.